afternoon, everyone. My name is Nina Anderson, and today I'm going to present to you the independent study project I've been working on this quarter, which is Discovering Design and Disability. And this project is an education initiative for high school students that teaches them about design in the context of assistive technology, products that help improve independence and quality of life for people with disabilities. And so before I really get started, I wanted to give you an outline for what I'm going to talk about. First, I'll give you my background and my inspiration for the project. Then I'll give you an overview, what is Discovering Design and Disability. I'll talk about my motivation and my approach to developing the program, as well as the details of the program and what I need to do from where I'm at now to actually launch the program. And then I'll end with just a learning demo of one of the lessons that I've been working on this quarter. So first about me, some of you already heard this, but at the end of the week I'll be graduating with my degree in mechanical engineering, and then in the fall I'll be starting a master's program in education at the University of Nevada, Reno. I hope to be teaching secondary physics and math. So some of my inspirations from the project come from my prior experiences. First, I was working as a research and design engineer at a small company called Beneficial Designs, which works on assistive technology design products for people with disabilities, as well as other projects like developing standards for people with disabilities. And in addition to this, I have worked on some of my own assistive technology projects while at Stanford. So one is a mechanical engineering capstone course, and then one in Dave's course. And these projects have inspired me to create this program, as well as a love for education, which I've had since I was little, but as I tutored in high school, I had a passion for high school education, and I had the chance to rediscover that earlier this year when I worked at a high school in the area. So Discovering Design and Disability is a high school service learning program. And this picture is a picture of me, but it also captures the experience that I hope high school students will get to have. I'm working with a woman there who had a stroke and has loss of mobility and sensation in her right arm. And our goal was to design a product for her to be able to use an iPhone more easily. And so the program would really be to help students acquire knowledge and background in design, disability, and assistive technology. And then they could use that knowledge to partner with community members who have disabilities, and then to work in teams to design products for them. And then finally, at the end of the program, they would explain and showcase the products that they worked on. So in the process of writing a description of the program, I also thought I would list out benefits that I think students may find from a program like this. So the first is that they would be able to develop career skills, and some of the career skills would include communication with each other in their teams and also with a community member. And then teamwork, which is a really important skill no matter what you do. And then as well as engineering and design processes, which I'll talk a little bit about why I think that's important in a minute. And then secondly, I think that students, hopefully this program would help them to become responsible, respectful, and active citizens. And this would happen through empathy and need finding, by working with somebody who is different than they are, by encouraging community engagement with the service learning aspect, and then hopefully fostering a spirit of innovation, a desire to see a need in the community and then create a solution. So there's three questions that I wanted to address. First is why engineering and design? And as I mentioned, I think this is an important career skill, and in my time at Stanford, I think a lot of what I've learned about engineering and design is useful for problem solving, not only in a technical application, but in many non-technical applications. So I think high school students can benefit from that, regardless of whether they plan to actually study in a STEM field. Second, why assistive technology? And this comes from my own experience working on assistive technology projects. And I think that a lot of good designs that will work for people with disabilities are relatively low tech, and they don't require a degree in engineering to be able to create a good solution. So I think that's a good way for high school students to work on a project that is accessible and realistic for their skill level. And then lastly, why service learning? And there's two aspects. The first I touched on, just promoting community engagement and working with people around you in your community. And then secondly, I think service learning is a great avenue for learning design, because oftentimes in a college course when you're working on design, you're not necessarily working face-to-face with your user. But in this program, when you're working directly with a person who has disability, it gives you the chance to really focus on their needs and to talk with them and get feedback directly. And user-centered design is often the best design. So in addition to those things, I wanted to come up with an approach to learning that I could use to center my whole curriculum around. And the learning approach was to engage the students, empower the students, and expand their knowledge. And so to engage them, I really wanted to keep an interactive model for the lessons that they do in the coursework section of the program as well as in the project. So I think it's really important that instead of just me telling them about what design is and what disability is, that they get a chance to interact with each other and with me. And then to empower them, I really want to keep an inquiry-based style of curriculum. And I had the chance to interact with this earlier this year in a math classroom. And for those of you who don't know, inquiry-based curriculum is different than the traditional style of classroom where the teacher gives a lecture and then the students get to practice the skills that they learn. But instead, the students are kind of given a question and then they get to investigate it, usually in teams, and then they use what they already know and build to a new concept that they'll learn. And so I found this to be surprisingly successful with high school students, and I think it's a great way to introduce them to STEM fields and including design. And lastly, I want to expand the students' knowledge, and the best way to do that is by getting their hands on the work that they're studying. And so that comes specifically from the project track of the program, but also just in the lessons. If we can be as interactive and hands-on as possible, then I think that works best for high school age students. So for the program design, I first wrote a description, which is what I've already given you. And then I thought about the duration, what duration would be good for a program like this. And before I could write any of the lessons, I outlined some learning objectives. What do I want the students to end the program knowing? And then lastly, I outlined the curriculum for the coursework section of the program. So I imagine a program like this to span the whole academic year for high school students, and this is usually about 30 weeks, plus or minus a few weeks on either end of the start and end of the year. And I imagine the first section to be 10 to 12 weeks of coursework where we're working just with me and the students together to go over the background knowledge that they'll need to work on their projects. And then the majority of the program will be spent 18 to 20 weeks working in your teams and with your community member to design the product. And I understand that I haven't actually run this program before, so the timeline is flexible. And it might be that we need less time for the coursework and more time for the project work or vice versa. So I imagine that this will be on a sliding scale as I go through the process. So to outline the learning objectives, I broke it into 4 categories: design, disability, assistive technology, and then college and career skills. And I outlined a list of learning objectives for each of these, and rather than going through those with you, I thought I would try to summarize it. So for the design, I want students to be able to apply the design process to solve a problem. And that's a very general learning objective that encompasses a lot of different smaller learning objectives, which include being able to generate sketches and design drawings that enable them to communicate their ideas with their teammates, as well as turn their ideas from 2D concepts into 3D products. Next, prototyping and testing is probably one of the most important lessons to learn about design. And the prototyping stage can happen in the ideation phase of design where you're brainstorming, and it's best to just build the idea and see if it'll work. And then it happens all the way throughout the refining of the design and testing. And then lastly, I want them to be able to identify appropriate materials to use for their projects, as well as methods of manufacturing. And I think high school students have an exciting time right now ahead of them because of the developments in technology and design, especially with things like 3D printing, where they can create designs that they might not have otherwise been able to manufacture in another way. The second category is disability. So I really want students to be able to develop their own authentic perspective about disability, to be able to define it in their own words, to be able to understand the scope of disability in their specific community, as well as in our country and around the world. I want them to be able to talk, and not only talk, but think about disability with an appropriate level of sensitivity and authenticity. And then finally, to appreciate the challenges of living life with disability, as well as the complexities that disability brings to the society, such as ethical issues related to disability. The third category is assistive technology. And this term is kind of a general term that can be kind of confusing, and most people only think of maybe one or two things, prosthetics and wheelchairs, when they think about assistive technology. But I want students to understand what it is and who uses it, whose needs does it meet, and then also understand where you can get it and who pays for it, because assistive technology isn't always a medical device, so sometimes the person with the disability is the one who pays for it, and I think it's important for high school students to understand the market of assistive technology. Also to appreciate the challenges in the development of assistive technology, and I think this will mostly come in the form of the technical challenges. It can be hard to design for somebody with a disability because everybody is different, and even within the same group of people with the same disability, one design might not work for all of them. So I hope that students will learn that. And lastly, that they would consider the relevance of assistive technology in other design industries. And this is emerging in some big companies right now, like Google. I think they have an accessibility initiative, and they're trying to think about how can we design in a way that's inclusive of all people, including those with disabilities. And so as students are working on projects like this, I hope that they can consider how in the future, even if they're not interested in working in the specific field of design, that they could consider how to design for people with disabilities. And lastly, college and career skills. I think that this will allow them to deepen their research skills, not only online research skills, but face-to-face research with people, and directly related to that, that they would develop effective interviewing strategies, being able to develop good questions and get the feedback that you're hoping to get, both in the need-finding stage as well as in the testing stage of the design process. Third, to build strategies for resolving team conflict. And I think we can all attest that this is an important skill to learn. And finally, to strengthen written and oral communication skills, and this will be oral communication within your team, but also at the end of the program, being able to write and explain your process as well as present your product to a group. So this is the outline of the coursework section of the program, and not all of these units are necessarily the same length, but this is the order that I think makes sense to present them in. So the first unit, also I framed them with questions because this is the inquiry-based style, where the first is, who is an innovator? And I think a lot of high school students are familiar with engineering and design, but they don't really know what they look like in practice. So this first unit would just give students an opportunity to talk about what they think engineers and designers do, and then to bring in people who are engineers and designers in the real world to talk about what they actually do. Secondly, what is disability? And then unit 3 would be what is assistive technology, and I think those speak for themselves. The fourth unit is probably the longest unit of this section, which is how do we innovate, and that covers all the steps of the design process. And then lastly, I thought it would be good to end with an assistive technology specific design unit. And I think a good way to do this would be an interactive case study, where I take 2 of my own projects and give students a chance to walk through every step of the design process and to ask them how they would respond to different circumstances that I face throughout the design process. And I think this will give them a model to follow as they enter into the project phase of the curriculum. So what are the next steps to go from where I am now to actually launching this program and making it a real thing? And I've charted this out in sort of a diamond shape because I don't think all of these things need to happen in a specific order. They kind of all just need to happen at some point before the program starts. So first I'll talk about curriculum development and then collaboration with Nearpod. So this quarter I've spent time outlining and writing some lessons for the what is disability and what is assistive technology, but I have plenty more to write, and so there'll be plenty of time spent creating the lessons for each of the sections of the coursework. And then in addition to creating them, I need to test them to see if they actually work with high school students and see what works and what doesn't and what needs to be refined. And the best way to do that is to get feedback from students and also from other educators. And then lastly, I'd really like to make the lessons available on Nearpod. And Nearpod is an educational startup that is relatively new in the last couple years. And they have an application that can be used on computers, tablets, cell phones. And it really gives a chance for interactive learning because you have the option to get real-time feedback from your students in the form of answers to quiz questions, open-ended prompts. They can draw and then submit a sketch. And I think this is a good way to promote that interactive learning instead of just having me give a presentation to them. Also, I think that if I can launch with Nearpod, then I can make the lessons available to other educators who might be interested, maybe not in every single lesson that I've written, but a few that they want to apply in their own classrooms. And then the second set of steps is building community relationships, which is probably the most important step in order for me to make this program happen, and then finding funding and material. So in terms of community relationships, there's a couple different demographics. First is gaining school and student interest and approval. So this will be a lot easier once I'm working in a school, at least to gauge interest, maybe not to actually get approval. But to figure out, is the school willing to have a new program like this in action? And are there students who are interested in joining the program and participating? The second is building relationships with community members who have disabilities. And I can do this by going to assisted senior living centers, working with organizations for independent living for people with disabilities and trying to meet people that way, as well as organizations that work with children with disabilities. And by building relationships with these people, I can find volunteers who would be willing to work with high school student teams and have them design a product for them, even if it's not something that is guaranteed that they will be able to use it after it's designed. And then lastly, finding a team of volunteers that's willing to work with me in the day-to-day of the program. So even if we're meeting twice a week during the school year and there's many students interested, I don't think I can coach all of the teams at once, so it'd be nice if other educators are interested in being involved in a program like this. And then lastly, finding funding is a big thing, especially for the program costs, which would be mostly initially student materials for the projects. And so I spent some time this quarter researching grants that are available. And there's quite a few service learning grants that I would probably start with that are available for schools specifically. And then I'm sure that there are STEM grants that might also be applicable to this kind of a program that I could try for as well. So with curriculum development and collaboration with Nearpod, as well as building community relationships and finding funding and materials, this will all lead to hopefully the successful launch and even the expansion of this program for high school students. So thanks for your attention, and before I move to the learning demo, we can take questions. And I wanted to thank Dave for being willing to mentor me and brainstorm with me this quarter on some of the lessons that I worked on. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I think it was really great that a lot of the points that you brought up in your presentation were the exact same ones that I bring up in the course. So I don't think that's by accident. So thank you for doing that. Just a couple of comments. I think when you start any new course, whether it be at the high school level or even at the university level, you can consider each year a prototype because you're learning. So don't be afraid to fail or not get it all right the first time. So it's going to be a learning process. I think for me, it took about 3 or 4 years before I got comfortable with the material. So keep that in mind. You might also want to connect with the companies and other facilities like hospitals. I'm not sure if there's a VA center up there or...
There is one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that may be a good place to look for not only patients, but also healthcare providers that might be a part of your team work with you. And one thing in dealing with high school students and dealing with other students is what I brought up in class called the coolness factor. So I think students will really like to work with you if they think it's cool in some respects. So I'm not sure exactly how to do that.
We'll see if students think I'm cool or not.
Cool.
Maybe?
Yeah.
Usually the word Stanford to high school students equals cool, but not always.
Yeah. Well, you're a cool person. That's obvious. But it brings up the point that if you aren't physically in a class, if you're behind the scenes in Nearpod, then the students are maybe missing that one-on-one educational experience. So that could be one thing that may be at a disadvantage in putting it in all electronic form.
Well, the thing with Nearpod is not to replace the teacher or the one-on-one interaction between teachers and students, mostly just to be able to enable the opportunity for more interaction than you would have in a normal classroom setting.
Yeah, I got to remember, it's still in the classroom. It's not like an online thing.
Right, it's not online learning. I can show you guys the website that you can build lessons on Nearpod, but you can add activities, and then I don't know if this was meaningful to me in high school, but some high school students might have a problem if it's not anonymous, and so they don't want to raise their hand and say an answer. But with Nearpod, you can just type your answer and you submit it, and it's anonymous when it goes up. And so I have access to them, but not all the students know where it comes from. And so I think that's a good avenue for opening up discussion, and they can bring up their point anonymously, but then if they want to comment on it with the other students, then it's a more comfortable setting.
When you were in high school, did you have anything like this for yourself?
I didn't.
Totally new.
I went to a pretty small high school in Lake Tahoe, and we didn't have many after-school programs that were definitely not like this. We had the usual community service clubs and academic teams.
Will you be able to do some of this while you're studying for your master's in education? Or is this...
I'm hoping so. So I'm going to be substitute teaching while I'm taking classes for my master's, and hoping that while I'm around schools, I can sort of talk to my colleagues about the idea and see where there's interest and go from there.
I really like the name Discovering Design and Disability because I think it makes it more accessible to people who aren't necessarily comfortable with design and knowing anything about it. And I had a question. Do you know if there's any other programs out there already that are doing something like this? Like, the closest thing I can think of is like application laboratories. It's really connected to, but...
In my search, which certainly wasn't comprehensive, I found, in Reno at least, there's a program that's actually a national program called Project Lead the Way, and it's a little bit different than this because it's more of a curriculum that students can choose as part of their high school curriculum. They enter this program and then they take an engineering 101 class, and then they can specialize in a field of engineering, but it's like, I think they have maybe aerospace, and I don't know what they teach high schoolers about aerospace engineering. They have like agricultural engineering, but it's more of a 4-year class-based program. There's a program somewhere in the Bay, I think it's at Foothill College, that is kind of like this, but I don't know of any for high school students.
Yeah. At Foothill College, the introductory engineering course also focuses on assistive technology, and I've been judging some of their projects over the last 3 or 4 years.
You mentioned that this would be a 1-year program. Is there any plan for multi-year?
I haven't thought that far ahead, but I guess there could be. Students could certainly work on a different design project every year and learn different things every year from it. I hadn't thought about what kind of coursework I would include in a multi-year sequence.
And couldn't the students themselves become teachers in the 2nd and 3rd year?
Yeah, that's
First
definitely
year?
possible. Or they could turn it from a high school program to a middle school program, and the high school students could mentor the middle school students. It's a lot of possibilities.
Just a question. Do students get any kind of academic credit for their after-school studies? How does that work?
No, not usually. Usually it's just by choice that you participate.
I was going to ask a simple question about how to bring students in. I have some recent experience working with after-school programs with design students. I'm interested to talk with you a little bit more afterwards. I think that there are some neat opportunities that students have, whether it's in service learning or other ways in which they can get credit. I think that I was going to ask if you thought about shorter versions of the program, ways to sort of bring students in as a little less
Commitment.
less commitment. Have you thought about that as an on-ramp?
One of the things, with the curriculum development and curriculum testing, right now I spent most of my time looking at what is disability lessons and what is assistive technology. And in the contact I have at Nearpod, they kind of suggested that they'd like to see curriculum tested and refined, and they suggested, well, why don't you focus on one learning module and then go from one learning and then use what you know about what works for students to build the rest. And so that was kind of my initial thinking, was let me just test out maybe just teaching high school students about disability and then see how that works and then gauge interest that way as well.
Another thing that might really help you right at the beginning is to figure out ways to measure your success. So, you can do it like I do it in my class, evaluations, talking to students, stuff like that. So, that's sort of really important to get that feedback, like we were saying. Mm-hmm. And one other thing, do students get a grade?
I don't think they will get a grade, especially if it's not for any credit. I think probably the best grade would be how they feel about how much they achieved in their own project and their presentation at the end of the program. And I think to answer your question about maybe doing a shorter version of the program, with the project, I've worked on an assistive technology project in 10 weeks, and it's doable. I haven't worked with high school students in design before, so I'm not sure, is that too rushed to work on a project where you're interfacing with a community member? And I'm not really sure. So that's my estimated timeline. Steve?
So it seems like you've already decided that it's like an after school or some other supplement to high school. Why not have it be a high school elective?
It could be an elective. I think I would consider that, and it depends on what school I get hired at and how much freedom I have to initiate something like that. If it's a charter school that's smaller and is willing to take on electives that are kind of radical, then that would be great. If it's a public school, it might be a little more challenging, especially as a new teacher. Maybe in 10 years, I don't know how long it takes to establish the rapport that you need to say, hey, I want to start this. But yeah, it really depends on that's all about the building community relationships and if the school trusts me to start something like that.
Then I guess another alternative would be to offer it through a community college, high school.
Oh, like a dual credit kind of thing.
Like here in Palo Alto, students who are not doing well in high school can take community college classes.
That probably exists in Reno on some level, so that's something to look into.
I'm curious if you've considered how students with disabilities will participate as students in your class. For example, is Nearpod fully accessible with screen reading software? And have you thought about different ways that you might need to adapt your course materials or sort of foster teamwork so that there's room for that as well?
Yeah, I think Nearpod is fully accessible from my understanding of it. I haven't actually run a lesson in Nearpod, so I'm not sure. Nor have I run one with a student with disabilities, but the goal would be so that everybody could be included. And I think that, especially because it's a team project, if a student with a disability has a limitation that prevents them from, say, actually physically building the prototype, at least they can work with the other students to give input to what is being built, and I think hopefully it will be inclusive. It also depends on the type of disability, and so I would have to cross those bridges as I talk with students who are interested in participating who might have disabilities.
Do you get any disabled students to be in your project?
Sure. I've had students who are blind and hearing impairments, a number of students in wheelchairs, and you find a way. Sometimes students are that good that they can find their own way.
Yeah.
But the Office of Accessible Education is very helpful in just making them good students on campus.
If everyone's doing okay on time, I'm gonna go through this. So hopefully I can get your participation. I'm just gonna walk through one section. So the What is Disability lesson that I've worked on writing is 5 different modules. I'll go over this in a second, but I'm just gonna go through the first one and just kind of pilot it with you guys. Hopefully you're willing to participate and discuss. And then I also want to mention that I've been writing this in a way that hopefully I can work with Nearpod, so there's not a ton of pictures on my slides because they have some open source picture rules that I'm trying to abide by. So, yeah. If you want to hand out those sheets, we'll get to that in a second. So in each lesson that I'll write, at least as I've planned it, this is what is disability, and it'll have a comprehensive list of learning objectives that are like a summary learning objective for each of the different lessons within this module. So students will create a definition of disability from their own perspective, they'll understand the scope, and these are the ones that I introduced to you in the presentation. And then this has an outline of the lessons that are included in this. So the first module is defining disability. Second, what is the scope of disability? How should we talk and think about disability? What are some challenges that people with disabilities face? And tough questions about disability. So we're just going to go through defining disability. But I wanted to mention some cool things that Nearpod has to offer that I'm excited about with these other lessons. So what are some of the challenges that people with disabilities face? One of the new things that they just added is like a field trip feature where students who are on a tablet or a phone, they can take it and they go on this field trip and it takes them into a place, and then they can rotate the phone and it shows them whatever, like if you're history, you can go to a battlefield location and look around or something. And so one of the things that I brainstormed with the person at Nearpod is, how do we get students to understand what life with disabilities is like? Well, if we can maybe block out the vision for somebody who has a vision impairment, or I don't know, there's possibilities there where students can try to experience the disability in addition to just hearing from people who have disabilities talk about what life is like. So.
Excuse me, does that mean that they're able to use virtual reality or augmented reality?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have actually, so she showed me one example, and it was like I think it was for an environmental something lesson, but it took them to a certain environment, and then they could like look on the ground and see what things were crawling around, and it was kind of cool. So this is module 1, defining disability. So in this, students will be able to describe categories of disabilities, but consider more broadly what disability means. Students will create a definition of disability from their own perspective, and they'll understand various ways disability has been previously defined. So let's get started. So the open-ended prompt is, what does disability mean to you? So if you guys want to just take a couple seconds to think about what does disability mean to you. And in this case, this would be something where in Nearpod, it would come up and they would have the opportunity to submit a response. And then we can open up the responses and then discuss them as a class. So does anyone have any initial, what does disability mean to you guys?
A disability is a variation on the human condition that prevents some people from fully participating in life, in the aspects of life.
Thanks.
And we think about what abilities I have and what happens if I lose one.
Great.
Disability is a facet of identity that's discriminated against all the time.
Cool. So to start off, I'll talk briefly about the types of disabilities. So disabilities can be congenital or acquired. So people are either born with them or due to some kind of trauma, they might acquire the disability. And they exist as kind of two general categories, cognitive impairments and physical impairments. Cognitive impairments can be sensory perception, so maybe you can see, but your visual perception impairs you so that you can't read words the right way, or you have a problem with memory. And physical impairments can be sensory, or they can be motor, like paralysis. But the purpose of this isn't really to understand the different types of disabilities in the category and what they are. And I imagine that students and you guys could figure out or talk to somebody who has this disability, who has a specific disability, or research online about what it's like. But more broadly, I want to think about how can we define what disability is. So we're going to look at different ways that disability has been defined. This is the inverse definition, which is very in line with what you pointed out. So ability is defined as the possession of the means or skill to do something. And my question is, can we define disability as the opposite of ability? So this in Nearpod would be a chance to poll the students. agree or disagree. This definition is too broad and it shouldn't be used as a way to define disability. So what do you guys think? Too broad? Is it good to define disability as the opposite of ability? Not possessing the means to do something?
I would say no, but disability is my life's work and I'm very passionate about it. So from my perspective, it's the means that's disabled, not the condition.
One can accomplish something in a different way than someone with a full ability.
You have to accomplish something different.
Okay. So the next,
It's more like the world is disabled, not the person. The world has not done its job in compensating for that person's lack.
I realize I have a typo on this. This is supposed to say work-based definition. But persons with a disability are those who have a health problem or condition which prevents them from working or which limits the kind or amount of work they can do. Does anyone have any reactions to this one?
Is it just work? What about play?
Okay. So this is also a chance to pull the students. And rather, the idea behind things like facts, you can tell students facts or you can have them guess about the facts, and that's a chance for them to just like interact a little bit more. So what percentage of working age people in the US have some kind of disability? Working age being like 21 to 65. What do you guys think? How many percentage?
I'll take a guess at 40%.
40%? The answer is 35%, which was higher than I expected it to be.
Based on what definition is that based upon? We just talked about a couple different definitions.
It's based on the work-based definition, I believe.
Just think of all the people with eyeglasses. That's a disability. Can't see without it.
Does that include
Oh.
eyeglasses?
No, you have to have like uncorrected, or your vision has to be
Not correctable by
not,
one
yeah.
sense.
So when you wear glasses, you're no longer disabled,
I think,
But that's the point. Without the glasses, you are.
right? But the glasses make you able.
That's a really interesting distinction. So these are,
so if it included glasses, that would be 80%. Right?
And that's why I said 40.
I mean, it would be much higher.
yeah, so is this an, oh yeah, is this an uncorrected disability?
I'm not sure.
Well, what's interesting is that it's such a wide age range. The higher age you get, the higher the prevalence of disability.
That's
So
true.
this is probably a mean or a medium of
And it could be
all the
swayed.
age variations.
Yeah, it's a limited statistic, but... Okay, the next type of definition is the anatomically based definition, which is by the Department of Veteran Affairs, which uses a percent disabled definition, partially based upon loss of use of limbs, etc., that interferes with normal life function. So, what's the next slide is, what's the first word that comes to mind when you read that anatomically based definition? Yes. Anybody have any reactions to this definition?
Limiting
Limiting?
amputation, just like,
Yeah.
it's only talking about people who lost a leg.
Cool. Okay. The next definition is opportunity-based. So, limitations in a person's activities due to a health condition or impairment. And they define activities here as a broad enough term to include working, housework, taking care of personal and household needs, and other age-appropriate activities. Okay, and then the next definition is the ADA definition, which is disability is defined as an individual's physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So, the activity for this one is a quiz. Which type of definition that we've gone over so far best describes the ADA definition?
Opportunity.
Opportunity-based, yeah. And how do you guys feel about the opportunity-based definition of disability?
I invented it.
You invented it.
No, these are actually, right from my course slides, and I came up with opportunity-based about 4 years ago.
Okay, so now we're gonna go into a group discussion. So, I don't know, do you guys in the back have a paper, or can you share with someone? Okay, so if we could just get into groups 2 or 3 and read through the World Health Organization definition of disability and just talk about what stands out to you, what's confusing, and then we'll get back together in a minute, a couple minutes. You can talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about this definition that appealed to me is that disability is a 3-part proposal. So it starts with a problem that a person has with their body, which creates a limitation in what they can do as far as activity, which leads them to be restricted in participation with other people. So it involves the body, activity limitation, and a social restriction, actually. So that's from the first paragraph.
One of the interesting things I think about when I think about participation restriction as part of the definition of disability, it really broadens the term disability, and there's things that I can't participate in. As an individual, and so that's a participation restriction for me. And so thinking about it like that it really encompasses that people who have disabilities, as we know them, aren't necessarily the only ones who have some kind of disability based on this definition.
But what I've thought about over the years is that everybody has a little bit of a disability, and everybody who has a disability has ability as well. So it really blurs the term disability, because, I'm disabled in that I can't immediately communicate to somebody in the D school with my mind. I can't fly, I can only remember a few things at a time. So, when you take a look, the example that I use in class is that humans are pretty frail. And if you ask any superhero about humans, they're going to say we're pretty human, pretty primitive bunch of people.
I'm a little surprised that it seems like a very, very complete definition, and it also clarifies for me how inadequate my own definition was when we first started the discussion. But I'm surprised that there isn't the word spectrum in here. And it seems like it seems like you define disability, there's sort of like this line, like you're either disabled or you're not. So I'm a little surprised that it comes across if you read it, but I'm surprised that there isn't more language on that in this.
Yeah, that's a great point.
The definitions are so broad that so a woman cannot join an all-men golf club. Could be seen as an impairment, physical impairment. Which can interact socially.
Gender can be an impairment, definitely.
Yeah. It's definitely a very broad definition, and it does include scenarios like that. And I think that's good in a sense, because it encourages just a broader view of what disability is, and it does blur the lines between disability and those without disabilities. So, does anyone have any other comments on?
Well, one thing that strikes me about is that they nailed it on complex phenomena. Because
I see people with Lyme disease, some of them have severe impairments and yet they're extremely active in the community. And others have relatively small impairments and yet they are, in their minds, completely disabled. And they are legitimately sick because there's a very large impairment. But it's a complex phenomenon that involves a lot of aspects that are not necessarily quickly ascertained by just looking at them.
Yeah, that's a great. Okay, so to end the lesson would be the summary, which is based on what you learned today. Write your own definition of disability. So,
For me, it changes every year as I think more and more about it. So, and as I presented in class. So, my latest thought is one of the guys you saw in the movie, Fixed, talked about disability being a variation in the human condition. So that's on my mind these days, and I'm going to present a little bit more about that next year in my course. And by variation, I would say that a normal variation.
This is for high school students. It's tough.
yeah, it's tough.
You may want to also add that maybe a section at the right of what they think their own disabilities are.
That's a good suggestion. Yeah, I'm happy to take suggestions as well. Because I haven't even done this with students yet, so there's plenty of room to refine and revise.
That sounds like a really good idea.
Yeah.
And then just reflect on your limitations, especially after you've seen the limitations.
Yeah.
Definitions.
Yeah.
New thinking that I think they have not experienced.
One of the things that Dave does in his class is he poses a question, if you could have any superpower that you wanted, what would it be? And just to think about what can you not do now that you wish you could do, and as a way to think about what is life like with a disability, which kind of goes back to thinking about what are your own limitations and what would you wish that you could do if you didn't have that limitation.
And then the other thing I bring up in class is that the limitations we have as far as ability to move. We need planes and cars and stuff to facilitate our mobility. So those can be thought of as assistive technologies that we use as humans to do what we want to do. And if you take a look about everything around us, it's all to help us because we are so frail, meek, and puny that we need all the stuff around us. So one of the things...
Jackhammers.
Well, not the jackhammers. I'm just thinking about...
Like elevators.
No, I'm thinking beyond that. I'm thinking Stanford University is a piece of assistive technology because we're not born, with all the facts and figures and experience we need to live in the world. So we have to go through this incredibly long and expensive educational process to get to the point where we can actually help somebody else. So.
That 18 now it's called Google.
What?
There's a better assisting technology now, it's called Google.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's right. It's so because we don't have, the internet and electricity and lighting and stuff like that is all for people's good. And without that, these days, a lot of us would be really lost.
I mean, in reality, what is assistive technology?
Exactly. Everything is
Everything.
That's what I say.
Yeah,
Right.
totally. Your pen.
Does anyone else have any comments about defining disability or feedback on what you think would be good in
I think
a lesson?
it's a good item for discussion.
Okay, well, great. That's all I have for today, but thank you everybody for your time and for joining, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and good luck.
So you're all welcome to sit in on my class next winter quarter. And Molly, Molly's been there how many years?
I think 7.
7? I've only been there 10, so.
Yeah, I think I've been there 7.
Yeah, so in winter quarter, from 4:30 to 5:50, everybody's welcome, and what I also need is good student projects for students to pursue. So if you have any ideas, know somebody with a disability, or know a need that's a problem that needs addressing, I'll be happy to work with you on getting that, something to present to the students.
Let me add that unlike today, the class starts at 4:30, so parking is not an issue. It's every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon.
Right. And if you're not on my community email list, you're welcome to give me your name and email, and I'll send you announcements about the upcoming course.
Likewise, if you think you'll have additional comments in the future and you want my email, I can give you my email address.
What is it?
Okay. Well, maybe I should just type it
Use
up
your
here.
alumni one.
My alumni one?
Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't going to use my Stanford one. I was just going to give my personal email.
Okay.
Because I probably won't use my alumni
Okay, wait.
address
I'm
very frequently.
gonna shut this down.